What you are about to watch is a warning to prepare you for what every man will one day face, the moment when the woman who once worshipped him begins to see him as ordinary. When her eyes turn from desire to indifference, and the illusion of love built on admiration begins to die. This isn't a story of romance, it's a story of awakening. The original researcher to this truth had his work silenced and archived, never to be seen again in a defunct university. But as fate may have it, the truth never hides for long, no matter how much suppressed. Initially, she once looked at you like you were the center of the world, like you were a god. Every word you said mattered, every movement made her smile. But now look closer, she doesn't even flinch when you enter the room. What happened? How does a woman go from worshiping you to despising you? From leaning on your chest to crossing her arms? From whispering, "You're my everything," to shouting, "You've ruined my life"? This is the question that keeps men awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering how something that once felt eternal could rot in silence. You gave her stability, you gave her comfort, but somewhere along the line, comfort became boredom, and boredom became contempt. Let's be honest, most men don't see it coming. It starts quietly, a colder tone in her voice, a smaller smile when you come home, a growing list of invisible rules. Don't say that, don't wear that, don't be like this. The goddess you married starts to look more like a stranger, and you start questioning yourself. Did I change? Did she change? Or did time simply reveal what was always there? The answer, brother, is more brutal than you think. When she was young, she didn't just love you, she needed you. Your attention confirmed her power. Your desire made her real. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said that love between a man and a woman is nothing but the will-to-life nature's trick to keep the species alive. He believed men and women are merely vessels through which life reproduces itself. That early infatuation, that madness you called falling in love, wasn't freedom, it was biology in disguise. She wanted the strongest man she could get, the one who could protect, provide, and project confidence. Because back then, her power was beauty, and beauty fades. In her 20s, she wielded it like a sword. In her 30s, she polished it with fear. By her 40s, she realizes time has stolen her weapon. And that's where the story turns dark. There's an ancient image, an artist painting his muse. She stands before him, glowing, still, eternal. Her only power is his admiration. His only fuel is her beauty. But imagine the scene 20 years later. The artist's hands have grown rough, his eyes tired, and the muse? She's no longer the portrait of youth. Now, when he paints her, she doesn't smile. She studies him. She judges the brushstrokes, questions the light, mocks the effort. The worship has reversed. This, gentlemen, is the death of the muse. Take Daniel and Elise. Married for 23 years, 2 kids, a home, a quiet life. When they met, Daniel was driven, building his business from nothing. Elise was radiant, ambitious, the kind of woman who could make a room stop breathing. For years, their story was picture perfect. Daniel worked, Elise raised the kids, the bills were paid, the house was warm. But time, as always, collects its debt. By 45, Elise's reflection began to haunt her. The compliments had stopped. The male gaze, her invisible audience, had moved on. She no longer felt seen. And Daniel, unaware, kept living like nothing had changed. He still loved her, but not like before. He looked at her as a partner now, not a goddess. He respected her, but no longer worshipped her. And that, to a woman who once ruled through adoration, felt like betrayal. One night, over dinner, she said the words he'd never forget. "You've changed, Daniel. You're not the man I married." But what she really meant was, "You no longer make me feel like the woman I used to be." Men miss this shift because it's not loud, it's silent. It's the absence of sparkle, the quiet correction, the slow withdrawal. She's not attacking you. She's withdrawing the worship that once filled your lungs. This is what Friedrich Nietzsche warned about when he said, He who fights with monsters should see to it that he himself does not become a monster. Because when beauty loses its power, resentment takes its place. And the muse you once loved now fights you not because she hates you, but because she cannot bear to feel powerless beside you. Nietzsche believed that every being is driven by a will to power, a deep need to feel significance, to expand one's influence on the world. For men, that power often comes from building, work, mastery, purpose. For women, society teaches it through beauty, the ability to attract, to be desired, to command attention without force. But when that form of power fades, the will doesn't disappear, it mutates. She begins to seek control in new ways, through arguments, ideologies, moral superiority, even emotional manipulation. She no longer rules through allure. She rules through guilt. Picture this. You're sitting at the dinner table. The TV hums quietly in the background. She's scrolling through her phone, lips tight, eyes cold. You mention something funny from work, she doesn't laugh. You touch her hand, she pulls away. There's no fight, no tears, just distance. You can almost taste the separation in the air. That's when you realize the battle has already begun, and you didn't even see the enemy arrive. Men build empires for the women they love. We work, we sacrifice, we bleed to provide stability. We imagine that once we've built the fortress, we'll finally be loved in peace. But what if peace is the very thing that kills her attraction? That's the cruel irony. You give her the life she said she wanted, and in doing so, you destroy the tension that kept her desire alive. She begins to see you not as the hero, but as the warden of her boredom. Society tells women they deserve more, but it never tells men that stability often becomes invisible. No one applauds the man who keeps the lights on, who shows up every day, who stays. They cheer for excitement, not endurance. So when she starts pulling away, when she starts to find herself, what she's really doing is mourning her lost audience. And brother, sometimes you're the easiest target to blame. The Roman poet Ovid once wrote, "Love is a kind of war. And in every war, both sides believe they're the victim." You believe she turned against you. She believes you stopped seeing her. Both are right, and both are blind. Because the truth isn't about you or her. It's about time, the silent sculptor that reshapes every bond. And when the sculpture cracks, most couples don't rebuild it, they walk away from the dust. Every man must face this test. Can you still stand tall when the muse no longer kneels? Can you lead with calm when the woman who once adored you now challenges you? Can you love without being worshipped? Because the man who can't answer those questions ends up broken, bitter, or begging. But the one who understands what's happening, the one who sees the biology, the psychology, the philosophy behind it, that man transcends the fall. The muse always dies, Nietzsche might have said if he'd lived through marriage. But in her death, a man either discovers his purpose or loses it forever. As the curtain falls on her worship, the question that remains is not, why did she change? The real question is, what will you become now that her gaze is gone? That's the moment most men break. Because for years, her admiration was your mirror. You didn't just see yourself through your eyes, you saw yourself through hers. Her approval made you powerful. Her softness made you gentle. Her desire made you alive. But now the mirror is cracked. And without her reflection, you're forced to face a question most men never want to ask. Who am I when she no longer believes in me? Every war begins with silence. It doesn't start with shouting, it starts with distance. A look, a pause, a sigh. When a woman begins to feel invisible, something ancient awakens inside her. Not love, not hate, but the instinct to regain power. She was once the sun, and you orbited her light. Now, that light dims, and she panics. René Girard, the French philosopher, called this mimetic desire, the idea that we don't desire things directly. We desire what others desire. At first, her desire was to be desired by you. You were her validation, you were her proof of worth. But when that fades, She doesn't stop desiring, she simply changes the model. Now, she desires your position, your independence, your calm, your confidence. She doesn't want your affection anymore, she wants your power. And that's the tragic twist. The woman who once found meaning in your strength now competes with it. The goddess becomes the general. The muse becomes the rival. Carl Jung said that every human being has an inner opposite. A man has the anima, the inner feminine, and a woman has the animus, the inner masculine. When these energies stay unconscious, they emerge as projections. When she was young, she projected her animus onto you. That's why you seemed larger than life. You embodied everything she admired, but hadn't yet developed within herself. Strength, logic, direction, will. But when she reaches midlife, her psyche demands balance. The inner masculine she once projected onto you now demands to be owned by her. She starts to think, speak, and act like the man she once adored. She stops saying, "Lead me," and starts saying, "You can't control me." This isn't rebellion for rebellion's sake, it's her unconscious trying to evolve. But evolution without awareness becomes destruction. Instead of integrating her masculine side through growth, she expresses it through conflict. And you, standing there, become the battlefield. Nietzsche once said, "Everything that lives seeks to discharge its strength." That's what the revolt is, a transfer of strength. When her old weapon beauty fails, she must find a new one. And in a world that worships ideology and moral superiority, she learns to wield those instead. If she can't rule you through desire, she'll rule you through guilt. If she can't seduce you, she'll shame you. This is not evil, it's survival. She's not plotting your fall in a dark room. She's just trying to feel powerful again in a world that stopped applauding. But the danger is when that search for power turns into resentment. Because resentment, as Nietzsche warned, is the poison of those who can no longer create but still crave control. It's when love becomes politics, when romance turns into ideology, when the bedroom becomes a courtroom. Adam was a man of quiet strength, worked hard, built a business, faithful to his wife for 20 years. Laura was stunning once, envied by her friends, the kind of woman who commanded attention without saying a word. But in her 40s, something changed. She started reading self-help books, posting quotes about rediscovering the self, and going out more often, girls' nights, spa retreats, self-care weekends. At first, Adam was proud. He thought she was growing, but he didn't notice the small shifts, the tone, the eye rolls, the way she began finishing his sentences like a rival, not a lover. One night, she looked at him across the kitchen table and said, "I don't feel seen anymore." But what she really meant was, "I no longer feel powerful beside you." Soon, her social media was full of slogans. Strong women don't need validation. Don't let men define your worth. Find your truth. But behind those posts was something simpler. A war between the woman she was and the woman time forced her to become. Adam didn't fight back. He retreated silent, confused, defeated. He didn't realize the truth Nietzsche and Jung both knew, that when power shifts, the only way to survive is to transform, not defend. Men often mistake her revolt for rejection. They think she hates them. But what she really hates is what she's lost. She sees her fading reflection in your calm confidence, and it infuriates her. You remind her of the woman she can't be anymore, soft, desired, adored. So she imitates your hardness. She copies your language. And soon, she becomes the competitor you never asked for. This is the cruel paradox of midlife love. The more you stay stable, the more she feels trapped. The more you lead, the more she feels small. And the moment you try to appease her, you lose her respect. You can't win that game. Because the game itself is broken. The only victory is awareness. To stand calmly in the storm. To see the psychological process for what it is, the death of the muse, not the end of your manhood. Every man reaches a crossroad after her revolt. Either he collapses into bitterness, or he rises into purpose. Collapse looks like this. chasing her approval again, trying to fix what biology already rewired. Losing your edge, your direction, your masculine calm. Rise looks like this. Accepting that admiration was never love, it was worship. Understanding that her revolt isn't personal, it's natural. Rebuilding your identity outside of her validation. You were never meant to live for her gaze. You were meant to build something greater than her attention. And if her love can't survive your strength, then it wasn't love, it was dependency dressed as devotion. Picture this moment. You're sitting alone in your car at midnight. Rain slides down the windshield like veins of glass. The seat beside you is empty, but strangely, you feel peace. Because for the first time, you're not chasing her eyes. You're looking into your own. That's the beginning of masculine awakening. When you stop reacting to her revolt and start realizing it was never about her at all, it was about you. The death of the muse doesn't have to mean the death of the man. It can mean rebirth. Because once you understand the revolt, you see the truth. It was never her job to keep believing in you. It was yours. And when the storm clears, one question remains. Can you rebuild love without power? Can you lead without needing to be followed? Can you be complete without being adored? That's the next test, brother. And that's where we go next. Music fades into slow, rhythmic pulse, a heartbeat continuing after chaos. Can you be complete without being adored? That's the riddle every man faces after the storm. Because when her gaze fades, when the applause dies, when the worship is gone, what's left? Most men fall apart here. They try to rebuild the past. They chase the same affection that time already buried. But a few, a rare few, see the moment for what it really is, a calling. The house is quieter now. No arguments, no tears, no noise, just silence. It's the kind of silence that used to frighten you, but now it feels almost sacred. You sit at the edge of your bed, staring at the wall, realizing that for the first time in years, there's nothing left to prove. And strangely, that's the beginning of peace. Because before, you weren't loving her, you were trying to be loved by her. You weren't leading, you were performing. You weren't living, you were acting. Erich Fromm, in The Art of Loving, said, "Mature love is union under the condition of preserving one's integrity, one's individuality." You lost that individuality when you built your worth on her admiration. And now, standing in the ruins of that illusion, you finally understand. Love without freedom isn't love, it's dependency. The modern man has been trained to seek reflection, not reality. From childhood, he's told that his value depends on how others respond on approval, attention, success, or sex. So when the woman he loves withdraws that validation, his entire self-image collapses. But that collapse is necessary. It's the burning away of the false self. Carl Jung would call this the beginning of individuation, the painful process of becoming whole. He wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. You are not dying here, you are being born again, this time without the costume. The provider, the protector, the performer, all those masks melt away, and beneath them is the man you were before the world told you who to be." Mark was 52 when his wife left. She said she needed to find herself. After 27 years, she walked out, leaving a house full of memories and a man full of silence. At first, Mark drowned in bitterness. He called her ungrateful, cursed her vanity, replayed old fights like broken records. But eventually, he stopped. Because rage couldn't fill the emptiness, it only kept it alive. One morning, he took a walk. No destination, no purpose, just motion. He watched the sunrise and realized something simple. He hadn't been living for years, he'd been existing through her perception. She was his audience. Her approval was his script. And without her applause, he didn't know his own lines. That morning, Mark did something he hadn't done since his youth. He sat down and wrote, not to impress, not to prove, just to speak. And in that act, he rediscovered himself. Because that's what rebirth looks like. Quiet, raw, unglamorous, but real. Søren Kierkegaard said that human life moves through stages: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the spiritual. The aesthetic stage is the chase, beauty, pleasure, excitement. That's where most love stories begin. The ethical stage is duty, commitment, sacrifice, order. That's where most marriages live and die. But the spiritual stage, the final one, begins only when everything collapses. It's the moment you lose everything you thought made you valuable, and you still choose to stand. That's where faith begins. Not religious faith, but existential faith. Faith in meaning beyond validation. The faith that your worth doesn't depend on who desires you, obeys you, or praises you. In that stage, the man becomes what he was meant to be: a creator, not a consumer. A giver, not a beggar. He no longer asks, "Does she love me?" He asks, "Do I live in a way that love itself would recognize?" Here's the truth few will tell you. The destruction of your relationship isn't always a tragedy. Sometimes it's a rite of passage. You were never supposed to stay the man she met because that man was only half awake. He needed worship to feel alive. He needed beauty to feel strong. He needed validation to feel real. But once that's stripped away, you're left with something indestructible: sovereignty. Sovereignty isn't arrogance, it's self-ownership. It's knowing that your peace, your purpose, and your identity can't be stolen, not even by love. The phoenix doesn't rise because it wants to impress. It rises because it refuses to die in the ashes. And in that rise, every man must face his shadow, the weak part that craved attention, the lazy part that stopped growing, the fearful part that mistook comfort for love. When you face that shadow without flinching, the masculine spirit is reborn. Fromm said, "Love is not primarily a relationship to a specific person. It is an attitude, an orientation of character, which determines the relatedness of a person to the world as a whole." The man who truly understands love doesn't need to be adored, he needs to become love in action. Not sentimental love, not romantic dependency, but disciplined, conscious love, love as a decision. That's the antidote to the matron's revolt. Not hatred, not withdrawal, not cynicism, but mastery. Because the man who loves consciously cannot be manipulated emotionally. He sees clearly, and because he sees, he forgives not out of weakness, but out of understanding. He knows she's not his enemy. She's the mirror that forced his awakening. Visualize this. A man walking alone at dawn, the city still asleep, the sky bleeding orange over gray rooftops. He's not chasing anyone. He's not proving anything. He's simply walking forward. That's what masculine rebirth looks like. Simple, steady, unglamorous, but unstoppable. The beauty of it isn't in noise or revenge. It's in the quiet confidence that says, "I no longer need to be seen to exist." That is freedom. That is strength. That is the man who survives the death of the muse. Every love story is a test of power. At first, she tests your desire. Later, life tests your patience. And finally, time tests your purpose. Most men fail at the last one. They let the loss of admiration become the death of direction. But those who rise, they become unshakable, because now they know what real love is. Real love isn't worship, it's endurance. It isn't admiration, it's awareness. It isn't dependency, it's freedom. The muse dies. The marriage changes. The world moves on. But the man remains calm, silent, focused. He builds again, but this time not to be adored, to be eternal. The muse will die. But the man who learns to love without needing worship will live forever. He no longer needs to be seen to exist. That's where Act 3 ended, and that's where Act 4 begins. The man who once lived for her eyes now walks guided by his own. The chains of validation lie behind him, rusting in the dust. What lies ahead is harder than love, colder than desire, but far more eternal: purpose. Most men think freedom feels loud, that it roars. But real freedom whispers. It's the quiet knowing that you are enough without applause. In this silence, a new kind of authority is born, not dominance, not arrogance, but presence. A presence that doesn't demand submission, yet bends the world naturally. Because the man who rules himself never needs to rule anyone else. Nietzsche once said, "Become who you are." That's the command of every true man. Not be who they expect, not stay who you were, but become. To become is to shed, to suffer, to rebuild until what's left is solid as stone. This is the masculine crown, not made of gold, but of clarity. Earlier, we spoke of Schopenhauer's will, that blind biological push that drives life forward. Men chase, women allure, nature keeps spinning. But once a man sees through that illusion, he must rise higher from the will to meaning. That's what Viktor Frankl found in the darkest of prisons. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Your why is what makes you unbreakable. It's what replaces her gaze when it's gone, what holds you steady when the world mocks you, what guides you when no one believes. And here's the truth. No woman, no fame, no fortune can give you that why. It must be carved from solitude, from pain, from honest self-confrontation. The man who lives by instinct is a beast. The man who lives by attention is a performer. But the man who lives by meaning, that man is king. When men stop chasing affection, they start building legacies. Legacy isn't about being remembered. It's about leaving something that doesn't die when you do. For some, it's a craft, words, architecture, invention. For others, it's the children they raise into strength instead of comfort. For a few, it's simply the example of a life lived without resentment. Kierkegaard wrote that the knight of faith rests transparently in the power that established him, meaning a real man doesn't stand on the world, he stands through it. He becomes a bridge between what is and what ought to be. That's legacy, not applause, continuity. Elias was 60 when his second marriage ended. He didn't fight, didn't beg, didn't spiral. He went to the countryside and built a workshop. Every morning, he'd wake before sunrise, light a small fire, and carve wood until dusk. When asked why, he said, "Because the world breaks enough things, I'd rather build." That line became legend among the few who knew him. No bitterness, no revenge, only work sacred, quiet, pure. That's what masculine transcendence looks like. Creating even after destruction, building even after betrayal, loving life enough to keep shaping it. Every reborn man builds 3 temples. The body, discipline. He trains not for vanity, but for honor. Strength becomes prayer. The mind, knowledge. He reads, reflects, questions. Wisdom replaces reaction. The spirit, service. He gives without needing recognition. Contribution replaces craving. In these temples, he worships not women, not power, but order. And through that order, he earns peace. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That is the final evolution of the masculine path. Action is greater than discussion. Presence is greater than performance. And what of her, the muse who revolted? Does she disappear from the story? No, because a woman, too, transforms. Sometimes she returns not as the goddess of desire, but as the companion of wisdom. Sometimes she doesn't return at all, and that's fine. The point isn't to win her back. The point is to no longer need to. If she sees your evolution, she may respect you again, not because you chased her, but because you outgrew her. If she doesn't, she will watch from afar as you build what no revolt could destroy, your center. And that, paradoxically, is when love becomes possible again, because you are no longer its slave. So where does this leave you, brother? Standing at the edge of the old world, staring at the new one you must forge. The call is not to bitterness, not to hate women, not to mock the fallen. The call is to rise above the cycle entirely. Rise above lust, disguised as love. Rise above dependence, disguised as devotion. Rise above comfort, disguised as peace. The age of the consumer man is ending. The age of the builder king is returning. Be the man who can be alone without being lonely, who can love without losing himself, who can lead without needing followers. Because when men return to mastery, families heal, sons grow bold, and civilizations stabilize. Every empire began with one man who decided, I will rule myself first. Picture it now. The same man who once begged for her affection stands on a cliff at dusk. Wind on his face, fire in his eyes. He's not chasing anything. He's anchored. His voice echoes, steady. I am no longer defined by who desires me, nor broken by who leaves me. I am the architect of meaning, the guardian of discipline, the lover of truth. He smiles not the smile of victory, but of a rival. That's the masculine crown, earned, not given, forged through solitude, polished by struggle, immortalized through purpose. Let her worship fade, let the muse die, because only in her silence will you hear the voice of who you truly are. The world doesn't need more adored men. It needs awakened ones. Men who walk without mirrors, love without weakness, and build without applause. This is not the end of love. It's the rebirth of man. And in its fragments, the man no longer sees loss, he sees clarity. He remembers now. He was never meant to live in reflection. He was meant to cast his own light. You've walked through the illusion of love, the revolt of power, and the fire of awakening. And if you've made it to this point, it means you've begun your own initiation, not into bitterness, but into sovereignty. Because true masculinity isn't about control. It's about command, not over others, but over the self. Again, remember this, gentlemen, that it is only a man who conquers nations and loses himself is a slave. But a man who conquers himself, even in silence, is already a king. Never forget this. That's what this channel is about. Not quick motivation, not recycled slogans, but the real, uncomfortable, sacred work of becoming whole. Every week, we go deeper into that path philosophy, psychology, the war between instinct and spirit. So if you felt something today, if this message echoed in the parts of you that the world keeps trying to silence, don't just scroll away. Take a breath. Look at the man in the mirror, the one who's been waiting for you to lead him. And then, when you're ready, subscribe. Not because I asked you to, but because you know deep down that you were built for more than comfort. Because you know that somewhere inside, the ancient fire is still burning, waiting for direction. This space exists for men like you, men ready to rise, to question, to rebuild. Men who are tired of being told to be ashamed of their strength. Men who want to learn the art of power without arrogance, of love without weakness, of solitude without despair. If that's you, welcome home. Like this video, share it with a brother who's struggling, and let this message spread. Not as noise, but as signal. Not as trend, but as truth. Because the world doesn't need more followers. It needs leaders of the inner realm. And the journey begins every time you return here, to think deeper, to feel stronger, to see clearer. This is not self-help. This is self-command. Subscribe, and let's rebuild men from the mind outward.